My artist is Duane Hanson, who is an American artist and sculptor. He was born in 1925 in a farming community in Minnesota. And because of this, he was exposed to the struggles of making money and working together as a community in a capitalist society. In the article, Duane Hanson Portraits from the Heartland, Mark Johnson states Hanson recognized both the physical and financial difficulties of those who made a living from physical labor. Duane Hanson's work is really interesting. All of his works are very hyper-realistic sculptures of people. And I'll get a little bit into like how he makes them in a second, but basically, it's interesting because there's a paradox of the simplicity behind the gaze of Duane Hanson's sculptures, because he puts them into a museum to be observed, but they are really just a reflection of the people that might be observing them. In order to create a strikingly realistic depiction of human form, he casts live models and creates a synthetic version of them with fiberglass and polyester and resin. So it's really interesting to learn about Duane Hanson's whole creative process and how he creates these 3D sculptures of people. An excerpt from the article titled Duane Hanson Portraits from the Heartland describes the process in which he makes the sculptures. And, quote, the artist formed rubber and plaster molds of each part of the subject's body. Arms, legs, torso, and head molds were each created separately. When the molds dried, they were cut off the model and filled with flesh-colored polyester resin reinforced with fiberglass. The next step was to paint the cast sculptures first with acrylic and then with oil paint. So upon observing and studying some of Duane Hanson's late works, which is what I'm focusing on in this presentation, I noticed that all of his works, are super realistic. They even made me feel kind of gross because of how realistic they are portraying these people, and it just captures all of the tiny, grimy, gross moments that are usually not depicted in art. So I thought they were a marvel, but apparently they have come under a lot of harsh scrutiny by high art critics. So his art is not an exception to the harsh critique of the art world. According to J.J. Charlesworth on Duane Hanson article, there is a conversation brought up on whether Duane Hanson's work is patronizing or noble. Because the people depicted in these are often average people doing very mundane things that we wouldn't have seen depicted as a piece of art. Like this lady laying down, looking kind of out of it, kind of near death almost. So through this, Duane Hanson brings up the idea of, sophistication and beauty and aesthetics in art, and he challenges the idea of conventional beauty through his works. The irony in all of this is that, the high art critics that he was kind of challenging, the idea of what is high art, they still did not like his work because it didn't represent the sophistication of what they understand art to be. So besides the fact that these sculptures are very realistic and amazing, that's an opinion, my opinion, but besides that, when we look at the context of what Duane Hanson is depicting, it actually reflects a lot of his political beliefs and makes the audience kind of think. So in this one, this piece called Woman Eating, it's, a woman who seems to be middle class. We can tell from her clothing, and we just assume these things. Eating at probably a diner because we can tell like the napkins and the ice cream, and she's like a little bit like she's not the ideal picture of beauty, which we have created in our society. So Duane Hanson depicts her, and um, an article that I read, Erica Doss, the article Duane Hanson's Woman Eating. Erica Doss mentions that Hanson's work seems to call attention to issues of modern American class, obesity, and consumerism, while also pointing out that how the American society is so focused on youth, thinness, and wealth that obese, middle-aged, poor folks are demonized as social problems. So, in Duane Hanson's work, he is depicting a kind of beauty that is often demonized in our society because we are so focused on the youth and thinness and, wealth of people. Something that I haven't brought up in my presentation so far is the fact that I'm focusing very distinctly on Duane Hanson's late works because his early works are very similar. They're very hyper-realistic depictions of people, but they're more involved with the terror and fear-based idea of, war and kind of shocking people into a harsh reality. And I think that's super interesting. I just decided to focus on his later works because they're more mundane, and I almost think that says more about society and how we value things that are shocking and make us think, but even the things that are mundane make us think. So I'm focusing on the later works. Because Duane Hanson's work is three-dimensional and is sculpture, people are able to interact with these sculptures, which I think is really cool because in a lot of the articles I've read, there are stories of people, visiting the museum, and they try to actually interact with these sculptures as if they were people because they don't know that they're sculptures, which I think adds to the entire effect of what Duane Hanson is trying to accomplish. He's trying to make his audience think and reflect, like, why is this the piece of art? And it kind of makes them think that, like, humans, our mundaneness is art no matter what, even though these people are not usually seen as beautiful or prized in our society. So I think that it's very interesting that Duane Hanson chose a medium where it's three-dimensional and people can interact with it. And then this is my works cited page. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.